He lost his sight and everyone he loved, until a maid restored his world. The accident happened on a perfect October afternoon, the kind of day that makes people believe the universe is benevolent. Alexander Ashford, at 33 the youngest self-made billionaire in tech, was test driving his new Aston Martin along the coastal highway when a truck crossed the center line. The collision was violent and instant. When he woke 3 days later in a private hospital suite, the world had gone dark. Temporary optic nerve trauma, the neurologist explained in that careful tone doctors use when nothing is certain. The impact caused significant swelling. With time and treatment, we expect your vision to return. It could be weeks, or it could be several months. Alexander's first visitor was his fiancée, Victoria. He heard the staccato click of her heels on the hospital floor, smelled her signature Chanel perfume before she spoke. "Alexander, darling," she began, her voice tight with something he couldn't quite identify. "This is absolutely terrible. The wedding will have to postpone everything. I can't possibly walk down the aisle with you like this." "Like what, Victoria?" he asked quietly. "I'm still myself, just temporarily blind." There was a long pause. "Of course you are, darling. But you must understand, this changes everything. The optics alone," she caught herself. "I mean, what will people think? What will the board think? Your condition makes you vulnerable, and in your position, vulnerability is dangerous." Over the next week, as Alexander was transferred to his estate to recover, Victoria's visits became shorter and less frequent. Her conversation shifted from wedding plans to practical concerns, his businesses, his assets, his vulnerability. And she wasn't alone in her worries. Catherine Ashford, his stepmother who had married his father 5 years before the old man's death, began appearing at the estate with alarming regularity. Alexander had never trusted her. She'd married his father for money and made no secret of her disappointment when the will left everything to Alexander with only a modest allowance for her. Now, she circled like a shark scenting blood. "Alexander, sweetheart," Catherine cooed one afternoon, her perfume cloying in the darkness. "We need to discuss your situation. In your condition, you're not fit to make business decisions. Victoria and I have been talking with some excellent attorneys. We think it's best if you sign over temporary power of attorney, just until you recover, of course. Someone needs to protect your interests." "My interests," Alexander repeated flatly. "Or yours? How dare you suggest?" Catherine's voice turned sharp. "I'm trying to help you. Without proper oversight, you could lose everything. Sign the papers, Alexander. Be reasonable." He refused. The next day, his attorney Marcus Chun appeared at the estate, grim-faced. "They've filed a petition for conservatorship," Marcus said, without preamble. "Victoria and Catherine jointly. They're arguing that your blindness makes you mentally incompetent to manage your affairs. They've found doctors willing to testify, lined up board members to express concern. Alexander, they're making a serious play for your empire." The betrayal cut deeper than any physical injury. The woman he'd planned to marry, the stepmother he'd supported financially for years, both were trying to take everything while he was most vulnerable. "Can they win?" Alexander asked, his voice hollow. "Not if I have anything to do with it," Marcus said fiercely. "I've already filed countermotions, and I'm calling in every favor I'm owed. Your medical team will testify that you're completely lucid. But, Alexander, we need to be smart. No rash decisions, no emotional reactions they can use against you. And you need help here, real help. Someone trustworthy to assist you, to prove you're managing fine. I don't need a babysitter." "You need an ally," Marcus corrected. "Someone with no stake in your money, no agenda beyond helping you recover." "Let me find someone." That someone turned out to be Elena Rodriguez. She arrived on a gray morning 2 weeks after the accident, after Victoria had finally stopped pretending and moved out, taking her belongings and leaving Alexander a voicemail about needing space. After Catherine's lawyers had served papers claiming he was a danger to himself and his assets. After the board had called an emergency meeting to discuss leadership continuity. Elena's footsteps were soft on the marble floor of the entrance hall. "Alexander," Sitting in the chair by the window he could no longer see through, heard her approach with the careful confidence of someone who knew exactly where she was going. "Mr. Ashford," she said, her voice warm and clear, carrying the faint music of a Spanish accent. "I'm Elena Rodriguez. Mr. Chen hired me to assist you during your recovery." "I don't need assistance," Alexander said automatically, the bitterness he'd been trying to contain seeping into his voice. "What I need is my vision back and for people to stop treating me like I'm incompetent." He expected platitudes, reassurances, the kind of professional sympathy he'd been drowning in. Instead, Elena pulled up a chair. He heard the whisper of wood on marble, and sat down. "Mr. Chen told me what your fiancé and stepmother are trying to do," she said quietly. That must feel like the worst kind of betrayal. The simple acknowledgement, without sugarcoating or false comfort, made something in Alexander's chest crack. "They waited until I was helpless," he said, his voice rough. "Like vultures." "You're not helpless," Elena said firmly. "You're injured. There's a difference. And from what Mr. Chen tells me, you're fighting back hard. That's not helpless. That's strong." "I can't even walk through my own house without crashing into furniture," Alexander said bitterly. "I knocked over a 200-year-old vase yesterday. I can't read documents, can't see people's faces, can't tell if someone is lying to me. How is that strong?" "You can learn your house again," Elena said practically. "Vases can be replaced. And as for people lying, Mr. Ashford, most people are easier to read by their voices than their faces anyway. You've just never had to listen before." Despite himself, Alexander felt the corner of his mouth twitch. There was something bracing about her directness, her refusal to treat him like he was made of glass. "So, what exactly did Marcus hire you to do?" he asked. "Help you navigate while you heal," Elena said simply. "I'll describe what you can't see, assist with daily tasks, and basically make sure you don't give those lawyers any ammunition by accidentally burning down your own kitchen." The first real conversation between Alexander and Elena happened 3 days after her arrival, in the library that had once been his sanctuary. He sat in his favorite leather chair, fingers gripping the armrests with unnecessary force, listening to the sounds of his own house as though it belonged to a stranger. Elena had spent the morning working in deliberate silence, respecting his need for space. But now, as afternoon light, which he could only sense as a vague warmth on his skin, filled the room, she approached with quiet purpose. "Mr. Ashford, would you like me to read the latest reports Mr. Chen sent over?" she asked. "He says the preliminary hearing is scheduled for next week." Alexander's jaw tightened. The conservatorship case. Victoria and Catherine's legal assault on his competence, his autonomy, his entire life. "No," he said tersely. "Marcus will handle it." "Of course," Elena said, without judgment. "Then perhaps you'd like to hear about the motion he filed yesterday? The one where he presented evidence that you've been conducting business calls, reviewing contracts through audio software, and making sound decisions." The judge apparently seemed impressed. Despite his dark mood, Alexander felt a flicker of interest. "Marcus told you that?" "He stops by every evening," Elena said. "Usually around 6 after you've gone upstairs. He briefs me on the case, asks how you're managing, makes sure you're eating properly. He's very worried about you, though he tries to hide it." Alexander was silent for a moment, absorbing this. Marcus, his attorney and perhaps his only real friend, checking on him even when he wasn't around. It was more loyalty than his fiancée had shown. "What else does Marcus tell you?" he asked quietly. Elena hesitated, and Alexander could hear her considering her words carefully. "He says that you're one of the strongest people he knows. That you built something extraordinary from nothing, and that you did it through intelligence, determination, and integrity. He also says that Victoria and Catherine made a serious mistake underestimating you." "Bit hard to be formidable when you can't see your own enemies," Alexander muttered. "Actually," Elena said thoughtfully, "I think it might make you more formidable. You're learning to listen differently now. To hear what people really mean beneath their words. That's a skill most people never develop." Alexander turned his head toward her voice. "You don't talk like a maid." "I'm not just a maid," Elena replied simply. "I have a master's degree in literature. I taught English at a community college until my mother got sick. The medical bills were substantial. Cleaning houses and private care pays better than adjunct teaching, and the hours are more flexible. The casual revelation, offered without self-pity or expectation of sympathy, shifted something in Alexander's perception. He'd assumed, as he realized now he'd assumed many things, that his household staff were simply there to serve, without full lives and stories of their own.
"Your mother," he said.
"Is she?" "She passed 6 months ago," Elena said gently. "But those last 2 years I had with her, being able to care for her myself, that was everything. I'd make the same choice again." Alexander felt the weight of her loss, the kind of grief that came from loving deeply and losing what mattered most. His own pain, the betrayal, the fear, the frustration, suddenly seemed less isolating. "I'm sorry," he said, meaning it. "Thank you," Elena replied. "She would have liked you, I think." She always said that a person's true character shows in how they handle being knocked down. Getting up is easy when you're winning. Getting up when everything's been taken from you, that takes real strength. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, and then Elena did something unexpected. She began to read, not business reports or legal documents, but poetry. "Hope is the thing with feathers," she began, her voice carrying Emily Dickinson's words like a melody, "that perches in the soul and sings the tune without the words and never stops at all." "I don't need poetry," Alexander said, but his voice lacked conviction. "Maybe not," Elena agreed, "but I think you need beauty. You've been living in darkness for weeks now, and everything you hear is about legal battles and betrayal and loss. You need to remember that there's more to the world than what's being taken from you." Over the following days, Elena wove beauty into the bleakness of Alexander's existence. During their morning walks through the estate, she guiding him along paths he'd walked 1,000 times but now felt foreign, she painted pictures with words. "The maple tree by the south gate has turned completely gold," she told him one crisp morning. "Not yellow gold, but the deep, warm gold of candlelight. When the wind moves through it, the leaves shimmer like thousands of tiny flames. And beneath it, there's a carpet of fallen leaves that crunch under our feet. Can you hear that? Like walking on cornflakes." Alexander found himself smiling despite his circumstances. Cornflakes. Well, very expensive, estate-grown organic cornflakes, Elena amended, and he heard the grin in her voice. She described the way morning fog rolled across the grounds like a living thing, how the fountain in the courtyard caught light and threw tiny rainbows. She told him about the kitchen cat, a tabby named Duchess that Alexander had never paid attention to, who had apparently decided Alexander's favorite reading chair was now her territory. "She's lying in a patch of sunlight right now," Elena said, stretched out like she owns the place. One paw is hanging off the edge, twitching in her sleep. "I think she's dreaming of chasing something." "I never knew we had a cat," Alexander admitted. "You had eyes but didn't see," Elena said gently. "Now you're learning to notice things differently. It's not a replacement for vision, but it's something." She was right. Alexander began listening to his world with new intensity. He learned to identify people by their footsteps, Marcus's quick, purposeful stride, the head housekeeper Mrs. Chen's measured pace, the gardener's heavy boots. He started recognizing rooms by their ambient sounds and smells, navigating with increasing confidence. But it was Elena's presence he came to recognize most acutely. The subtle scent of lavender she wore, the rhythm of her breathing when she sat nearby reading, the particular quality of silence when she was thinking carefully about what to say next. One afternoon, as she guided him through the conservatory, describing the orchids that his housekeeper cultivated, Alexander realized he was no longer thinking of her as the maid but as Elena, as a person whose company he actively sought, whose observations he valued. "You make everything sound beautiful," he said quietly. "The world is beautiful," Elena replied. "Even the hard parts. Especially the hard parts, sometimes. Difficulty has its own kind of beauty, like a storm or a scar, or someone refusing to give up when giving up would be easier." The conservatorship hearing arrived like an approaching storm, filling the estate with tension that even Alexander's blindness couldn't obscure. Marcus arrived early that morning, his footsteps more rapid than usual, the rustle of papers announcing his armload of documents. "We're ready," Marcus said, his voice carrying forced confidence. "I've got everything we need: medical testimonies, business performance records, statements from your staff. Alexander, you just need to show the judge that you're completely competent. Answer clearly, stay calm, and don't let them bait you." "Hard to stay calm when the woman who is supposed to marry me is trying to rob me blind," Alexander said bitterly. The irony of the phrase wasn't lost on him. "That's exactly what they want," Marcus warned. "Victoria's lawyers will try to paint you as unstable, emotionally compromised. Catherine will testify that you've become paranoid and irrational. They'll twist everything." Elena, who had been quietly preparing Alexander's breakfast, spoke up. "Then show them the truth. You've learned to navigate your home, manage your business, make decisions. You've adapted. That's not incompetence, that's resilience." Alexander turned toward her voice, drawing strength from her steady presence. Over the past 3 weeks, Elena had become more than an assistant. She'd become his anchor in the chaos, the one person who saw him as neither helpless nor invincible, but simply human. The courthouse was a gauntlet of whispers and pitying glances that Alexander could feel even without seeing them. Elena guided him through the corridors with quiet confidence, her arm steady beneath his hand, murmuring soft directions while Marcus ran interference with the press. "3 steps up," she said softly. Then through the double doors. Victoria is already inside, sitting at the plaintiff's table. She's wearing red, like armor. Catherine is beside her in black. They both look nervous, if that helps. "It doesn't," Alexander muttered, but he appreciated Elena's assessment nonetheless. She had a gift for reading people, for noticing details that mattered. The hearing was brutal. Victoria's lawyer, a sharp-voiced woman named Patricia Winters, painted Alexander as a man in crisis, unable to manage his own affairs, prone to paranoia and poor judgment. "Mr. Ashford has rejected medical advice, isolated himself from loved ones, and made erratic business decisions," Winters argued. "His condition has made him vulnerable to manipulation. He needs protection, even if he doesn't recognize it." Catherine took the stand, her voice dripping with false concern. "Alexander has always been stubborn, Your Honor. But since the accident, he's become impossible. He's fired longtime employees without cause, refused to see his fiancée, accused us of terrible things. He's not himself. He needs help." Alexander's fingers clenched the arms of his chair. The lies were so smooth, so practiced. He'd fired one employee, Catherine's nephew, who'd been caught embezzling. He hadn't refused to see Victoria. She'd abandoned him. Then it was his turn. Marcus guided him to the witness stand, and Alexander sat straight, facing toward where he knew the judge would be, though he couldn't see her. "Mr. Ashford," the judge's voice was measured, professional. "I've reviewed your medical records. Your doctors confirm that your blindness is temporary but potentially prolonged. How are you managing your daily affairs?" Alexander took a breath, centering himself. "I've adapted, Your Honor. I use audio software to review documents and contracts. I conduct business via phone and video calls. My team can see me, which maintains presence. I've learned to navigate my home and continue making all major decisions regarding my companies." "With assistance, surely?" Winters interjected. "Everyone uses assistants," Alexander replied evenly. "CEOs have assistants, analysts, advisors. I'm no different. I've hired qualified people to compensate for my temporary limitation. That's not incompetence, that's good management." Winters leaned forward. "Mr. Ashford, isn't it true that you've become dependent on your new caregiver? That you rely on her for everything?" Alexander felt the trap in her words. "Elena Rodriguez assists me with tasks that require vision. She doesn't make my decisions, but she influences them," Winters pressed. "A young woman, suddenly with access to a vulnerable billionaire. How do you know she's not manipulating you?" Anger flared in Alexander's chest, but Elena's words from that morning echoed. "Don't let them bait you. Elena has no access to my finances, no power of attorney, no stake in my companies," Alexander said calmly. Unlike the petitioners, who stand to gain millions if this conservatorship is granted. If we're questioning motives, let's question the right people. A murmur ran through the courtroom. Winter's voice sharpened. Your Honor, this is exactly the paranoia we're concerned about. It's not paranoia if it's true, Marcus interjected, standing. Your Honor, if I may. We have evidence that Ms. Ashford and Mrs. Catherine Ashford began meeting with attorneys about conservatorship within days of Mr. Ashford's accident, before he'd even left the hospital. They've also been quietly approaching board members, attempting to secure proxies to vote Mr. Ashford out of his own company. This isn't concern. It's a calculated takeover. The judge raised her hand for silence. I'll review all evidence. Mr. Ashford, I'd like to ask you directly, do you believe you're capable of managing your affairs? Yes, Your Honor, Alexander said firmly. I'm blind, not incompetent. I've built 3 successful companies, employed thousands of people, and navigated challenges far more complex than learning to function without sight. I'm learning, adapting, and continuing to lead effectively. What I need is time to heal, not to be stripped of my autonomy by people who see my temporary disability as an opportunity. The judge was silent for a long moment. I'm going to allow testimony from Mr. Ashford's staff. I want to hear from the people who interact with him daily. Over the next hour, Marcus called witnesses. Mrs. Chun, the head housekeeper, testified that Alexander was perfectly rational and managed household decisions as always. His chief technology officer confirmed he was actively involved in strategic planning. His doctor stated unequivocally that blindness did not equal mental incompetence. Then Marcus called Elena. She walked to the stand with the same quiet confidence she brought to everything, and Alexander wished desperately he could see her face. Ms. Rodriguez, Marcus began, you spend more time with Mr. Ashford than anyone. In your professional opinion, is he capable of making his own decisions? Completely capable, Elena said clearly. Mr. Ashford is one of the most mentally sharp people I've ever met. He remembers every detail, processes information rapidly, and makes thoughtful decisions. His blindness affects his mobility, not his mind. Winter stood for cross-examination. Ms. Rodriguez, you're being paid quite well for your services, aren't you? Enough to bias your testimony. I'm paid fairly for my work, Elena replied calmly. But I've turned down 3 separate offers, 1 from Ms. Victoria Ashford and 2 from Mrs. Catherine Ashford, to testify against Mr. Ashford for significantly more money. I'm here because I'm telling the truth, not because of payment. The courtroom erupted. The judge gavelled for order while Victoria and Catherine's faces, as Marcus whispered to Alexander later, went pale. You were offered bribes? The judge demanded. Incentives, they called them, Elena said. I was told I could name my price if I'd testify that Mr. Ashford was unstable, paranoid, or dependent. I refused. The judge's expression, Marcus told Alexander afterward, was thunderous. When court adjourned, the judge hadn't ruled yet, but Marcus was cautiously optimistic. Elena's testimony was devastating for them. Attempted witness tampering on top of everything else. Catherine and Victoria just buried themselves. As they left the courthouse, Elena guided Alexander through another gauntlet of reporters. But this time, Alexander held his head high. Whatever happened, he'd fought back. He wasn't helpless. And he hadn't fought alone. The judge's ruling came 3 days later. Conservatorship denied. Victoria and Catherine's petition was dismissed with prejudice, and an investigation into witness tampering was opened. Marcus called with the news, his voice cracking with relief and triumph. It's over, Alexander. You won. They can't touch you. But the victory felt hollow. That evening, as Alexander sat in the conservatory where Elena had first described the orchids to him, he felt the weight of everything he'd lost. His fiancée had never loved him. She'd loved his money, his status, the life he could provide. His stepmother had circled like a predator, waiting for weakness. Even some board members had been willing to betray him for the right price. You're quiet tonight, Elena observed, settling into the chair across from him. I thought you'd be celebrating. Celebrating what? Alexander asked bitterly. That the people I trusted tried to rob me? That I was so blind even before the accident that I couldn't see what they really were? You weren't blind, Elena said gently. You were trusting. There's a difference. Trust is a gift, Alexander. It's not your fault that some people aren't worthy of it. He turned his face toward her voice, toward the presence that had become as essential as breathing. How do you do that? Do what? Always know the right thing to say. Always make the darkness feel less consuming. Elena was quiet for a moment, and Alexander heard the soft rustle of fabric as she shifted in her chair. My mother used to say that darkness is just the absence of light. It's not a thing in itself. It's the space where light could be. When I describe the world to you, I'm not creating beauty that isn't there. I'm just helping you find the light that already exists. Tell me something beautiful, Alexander said suddenly.
Please.
I need to hear something that isn't about lawyers or betrayal or loss. Elena rose, and he heard her footsteps move to the conservatory windows. The sun is setting, she began, her voice taking on that particular quality it had when she painted pictures with words. It's November now, so the light is softer than in summer, more golden. The sky is layered, deep blue at the top, then gradually warming to lavender, then pink, then orange at the horizon. There are clouds, thin and delicate like brushstrokes, and they're catching the light, turning the color of rose gold. Alexander stood and moved toward her voice. She must have heard him coming because she gently took his hand and guided it to the window frame, positioning him to face the sunset he couldn't see. The trees are almost bare now, she continued, standing close enough that he could feel the warmth of her presence. But there are still a few leaves clinging on, deep reds and burnt oranges. When the sunset light hits them, they look like they're on fire. And beyond the trees, you can see the valley stretching out, the shadows getting longer, everything touched by this incredible golden light. It's the kind of sunset that makes you believe in magic. I wish I could see it, Alexander whispered. You are seeing it, Elena said softly. Just differently. You're seeing it through me. Alexander became aware of how close they were standing, of the way her hand still rested lightly on his arm, steadying him. Over the past month, Elena had become essential to him in ways that had nothing to do with his blindness. She was his confidant, his companion, the person who made him laugh when he wanted to rage against his circumstances. Elena, he said quietly, why did you turn down their bribes? Victoria and Catherine offered you money, probably more than I'm paying you. Why stay? She was silent for so long he worried he'd overstepped. Then she said, because you deserve someone in your corner who wasn't there for what they could take. Because I've watched you face every day with courage, even when you were terrified. Because somewhere in the last month helping you stopped being a job and became something else. Something else, Alexander repeated, his heart beating faster. What do you mean? I mean, Elena said, her voice barely above a whisper, that I've come to care about you. Not as an employer, not as a client, but as a person. As someone who makes me want to show up every day, who I think about when I'm not here, who I want to share every beautiful thing with because his darkness should mean he misses the world's light. Alexander reached out slowly, giving her time to move away. His hand found her face, fingers gently tracing the curve of her cheek, the line of her jaw. She didn't pull back. I don't even know what you look like, he said, wonder in his voice. But I know the sound of your laugh, the way you smell like lavender and old books. I know your kindness, your strength, your gift for finding beauty in everything. I know that when you walk into a room, the darkness feels less heavy. Is that enough? It's everything, Elena whispered. They stood there in the fading light, Alexander's hand on her face, Elena's hand covering his, two people finding connection in the most unexpected of circumstances. The moment was broken by Marcus's arrival, his hurried footsteps and urgent voice calling Alexander's name. I'm in the conservatory, Alexander called back, reluctantly stepping away from Elena. Marcus burst in, slightly breathless. You need to hear this. Victoria gave an interview to the press. She's claiming you manipulated the court, that Elena is your mistress who helped you deceive the judge, that the whole thing was a setup. Alexander's jaw clenched. Of course she did. She can't just lose. She has to try to destroy me on the way out. It's worse, Marcus continued. She's threatening to take the story to major outlets. Claims she has evidence of an inappropriate relationship that compromised the proceedings. It's complete fiction, but the press will eat it up, Alexander finished bitterly. The blind billionaire and his young, beautiful caretaker. It writes itself, doesn't it? I haven't agreed to be part of anyone's scandal, Elena said quietly, hurt evident in her voice. Alexander turned sharply toward her. Elena, I didn't mean. I know what you meant, she said. And you're right. I'm the help. You're the billionaire. People will assume the worst, because that's what people do. Maybe I should. Maybe it would be better if I left.
No.
The word came out more forcefully than Alexander intended. Don't let them drive you away. That's what Victoria wants, to isolate me, to make me look unstable. If you leave now, it proves her point. And if I stay, Elena said sadly, I become the scandal. Either way, I lose. Marcus cleared his throat. Actually, there might be a third option. We go on offense. Alexander, you give an interview, a real one, honest and open. You talk about the accident, the betrayal, your recovery. You introduce Elena as the professional caregiver who helped you maintain your independence. You control the narrative before Victoria can poison it. Alexander considered this. The thought of exposing his vulnerability to the world made his skin crawl. But the alternative, letting Victoria's lies stand, letting Elena be painted as something she wasn't, was intolerable. Set it up, he said finally. But Marcus, I need to ask Elena first if she's willing to be part of this. It's her privacy on the line, too. He turned to where Elena stood. I won't ask you to do this if you don't want to. Your life shouldn't become public property because of me. Will it help you? Elena asked simply. Probably.
Then I'll do it, she said.
But Alexander, after this is over, after the interview and the press coverage and all of it, we need to talk. Really talk. About what this is between us, and whether it can be anything real, or if it's just proximity and circumstances. Her words hit him like cold water. Was that what this was? Just two people thrown together by chance, mistaking gratitude and dependency for something deeper? You're right, he said quietly. We'll talk. After. The interview was scheduled for the following week, giving Alexander time to prepare and to panic. The night before, he barely slept, lying awake in his darkened bedroom that looked no different than it had for the past 2 months. Elena's words haunted him. Whether it can be anything real, or if it's just proximity and circumstances. Was she right? Had he confused gratitude with something deeper? Or was what he felt for Elena the most real thing he'd experienced in his carefully curated, controlled life? The morning of the interview, Elena arrived earlier than usual. Alexander heard her footsteps pause at his bedroom door before she knocked softly. Come in, he called, already dressed in the suit Marcus had selected. Navy blue, Marcus had said, because it looked strong on camera without being aggressive. How are you feeling? Elena asked, and he could hear the concern in her voice. Terrified, Alexander admitted. I've given hundreds of interviews about business, technology, innovation. But I've never talked about this. About being vulnerable. About feeling helpless. About. He stopped himself. About me? Elena finished quietly. Yes, he said. About you. Elena, before we do this, I need to know what you said the other night about whether this is real. Do you think it's not? He heard her move closer, felt her presence, as she sat on the edge of his bed. I think, she said carefully, that you've been through an incredible trauma. You lost your vision, your fiancé, your sense of security. I came into your life during the worst time, and I helped you. It would be natural to develop feelings based on that, gratitude, dependency, even affection. But when your vision returns, when you don't need me anymore, will those feelings remain? Or will you look at me and just see the maid who was there during a difficult chapter you'd rather forget? Her words were raw with vulnerability, and Alexander realized she was as scared as he was, just of different things. He was afraid of public exposure. She was afraid of being temporary. Elena, he said, reaching out until he found her hand. The day I get my vision back, do you know what the first thing I want to see is? Not my companies, not my estate, not the sunset or the gardens you've described so beautifully.
Your
face. I want to know if your eyes match the kindness in your voice, if your smile is as warm as it sounds. You're not a chapter one want to forget. You're the person who taught me to see what actually matters. He felt her hand tremble in his. Alexander. I know the optics are terrible, he continued, allowing himself a bitter smile at the word choice. Billionaire falls for his caretaker during a vulnerable time. It sounds like a cliché. But, Elena, I've had people around me my entire adult life. Assistants, advisors, partners, a fiancé who I thought loved me. None of them saw me the way you do. None of them made me want to be better, to notice beauty, to care about things beyond profit margins and stock prices. If that's just proximity and circumstances, then those are the best circumstances I've ever experienced. Elena was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, ask me again after you can see. When you have choices again. When you're not living in darkness. When I'm not the only light you have. If you still feel this way when the world opens back up to you, then I'll believe it's real. It wasn't the answer Alexander wanted, but he understood it. She was protecting herself, and he couldn't blame her for that. The interviewer was Sarah Chen, a respected journalist known for her thoughtful features rather than tabloid sensationalism. Marcus had chosen well. She arrived at noon, and Alexander heard the recording equipment being set up in the library. Mr. Ashford, Sarah's voice was professional but warm. Thank you for agreeing to this interview. I know this isn't easy. Please call me Alexander, he said, settling into his chair. Elena stood nearby. He'd asked her to be present, both for support and because Sarah wanted to speak with her as well. Sarah began with simple questions about the accident, his recovery, the medical prognosis. Alexander answered honestly, describing the disorientation, the fear, the struggle to adapt. Then she shifted to the conservatorship case. Your fiancé and stepmother tried to have you declared incompetent, Sarah said. That must have felt like a profound betrayal. It did, Alexander admitted. I was already struggling with losing my vision. To discover that the people I trusted were using my vulnerability as an opportunity to take everything I'd built, it was devastating. Worse than the accident itself in some ways. Tell me about Ms. Rodriguez, Sarah said. How did she come to work for you? Alexander turned his head toward where he knew Elena stood. My attorney found her. I needed someone to help me navigate daily life, while I couldn't see. But Elena became much more than that. She became my eyes, yes, but also my connection to the world I thought I'd lost. Can you elaborate on that? Elena doesn't just describe what things look like, Alexander explained, his voice softening. She helps me experience them. She tells me about the quality of light, the colors of flowers, the way wind moves through trees. She made me realize that I'd spent years with perfect vision, but seeing nothing that really mattered. She taught me to notice beauty, to appreciate small things, to understand that sight isn't the only way to perceive the world. Sarah was quiet for a moment, and Alexander could almost feel her journalist's instincts engaging. Ms. Rodriguez, she said, your former employer has suggested that your relationship with Mr. Ashford is inappropriate. How do you respond to that? Elena's voice was steady when she answered. My relationship with Mr. Ashford is professional. I was hired to assist him during his recovery, and that's what I've done. The accusation comes from people who tried to manipulate the court system and failed. They're trying to discredit both of us because the truth didn't serve their purposes. But you've become close? Sarah pressed gently. We've become friends, Elena said carefully. Mr. Ashford has been through tremendous challenges, and I've had the privilege of helping him through them. Friendship seems natural under those circumstances. Alexander heard the careful distance in her words, the professional boundaries she was maintaining, and his heart ached. She was protecting them both, but it felt like a denial of something precious. Alexander, Sarah said, turning back to him, what happens when your vision returns? Will Ms. Rodriguez continue in your employ? The question hung in the air like a challenge. Alexander took a breath. I hope, he said slowly, that Elena will continue to be part of my life in whatever capacity she chooses. She's helped me see, and I mean truly see, what matters. That's not something that ends when my optical nerves heal. As for what form that relationship takes, that's something Elena and I will need to discuss. But I hope very much that it continues. He heard Elena's sharp intake of breath, but couldn't read what it meant. The interview continued for another hour, covering his business operations, his adapted work methods, his plans for the future. But the heart of it, Alexander knew, was in those moments of honesty about vulnerability, betrayal, and unexpected connection. When Sarah finally packed up her equipment and left, Elena and Alexander sat in the library's silence. "You didn't have to say that," Elena said quietly, "about wanting me to stay." "I know," Alexander replied, "but it's true. Elena, I understand you want me to wait until I can see again. I'll wait as long as you need. But my feelings aren't going to change. Sight isn't what makes something real, connection is. And what we have, whatever you want to call it, is the most real thing in my life." "Alexander," Elena's voice broke slightly. "You don't have to say anything," he interrupted gently. "Just don't disappear when this is over. Give me a chance to prove that this isn't about circumstances or gratitude or dependency. Give me a chance to choose you with open eyes." "Okay," Elena whispered. "Okay." The headache started 3 months after the accident, on a cold February morning. Alexander woke to a pounding pain behind his eyes and a strange sensation he couldn't quite identify, like pressure building or something shifting into place. "We should call Dr. Morrison," Elena said when he mentioned it over breakfast, concern threading through her voice. The doctor arrived within hours, conducting a thorough examination in Alexander's bedroom. Alexander sat still as instruments probed and lights he still couldn't see were shown into his unresponsive eyes. "The swelling has decreased significantly," Dr. Morrison said, his voice carrying cautious optimism. "The headaches are likely a good sign. Your optic nerves are healing, reactivating. We could be looking at vision returning within days or weeks." Alexander's heart hammered in his chest. "Days or weeks," he repeated numbly. After the doctor left, Elena was unusually quiet as she guided him through his daily routine. The interview with Sarah Chen had aired 2 weeks earlier, and the response had been overwhelmingly positive. Public opinion had shifted firmly in Alexander's favor, with Victoria and Catherine facing harsh criticism and even potential legal consequences for their actions. The board had reaffirmed their confidence in Alexander's leadership. His companies were thriving. Everything was falling back into place, except for the one thing that mattered most. "You're quiet today," Alexander observed as they sat in the conservatory that afternoon. It had become their place, where she'd first made him see beauty in darkness. "I'm thinking," Elena said softly.
"About what?"
"About the fact that soon you'll be able to see again. That everything will change." Alexander reached across the space between their chairs, finding her hand. "Elena, I told you." "I know what you told me," she interrupted gently. "And I heard you. But Alexander, there's something you need to understand. These past months, I've been your whole world by necessity. When your vision returns, you'll have choices again. You'll see all the beautiful women you could have. Women from your world, with your background, your education, your wealth. Women who make sense as partners for someone like you." "Someone like me?" Alexander repeated, frustrated. "Elena, you have a master's degree. You're brilliant, kind, insightful." "I clean houses for a living," Elena said quietly. "I pay my rent week to week. My mother died buried in medical debt that I'm still paying off. Alexander, I've loved." She stopped abruptly, and Alexander heard her breath catch. "I've loved this time with you. But I can't be the person who traps you in gratitude. When you can see again, you need to be free to choose your own life." "What if I choose you?" Alexander asked, his voice rough with emotion. "Ask me when you can see me," Elena whispered. "When you know what you're choosing." The headaches intensified over the following days, accompanied by strange flashes of light that Dr. Morrison assured him were encouraging signs. Alexander found himself torn between desperate hope and growing fear. Hope that he would see again, fear that Elena was right, that sight would change everything between them. On a Tuesday morning, Exactly 14 weeks after the accident, Alexander woke to a revelation. The darkness wasn't absolute anymore. There was light, vague, unfocused, but undeniably light. He could see shapes, shadows, the suggestion of the window across his room. His hand shook as he reached for the phone, calling Dr. Morrison, then Marcus, his voice breaking as he reported what was happening. Elena arrived within the hour, her footsteps quick on the stairs. Alexander? Marcus called me. Said your vision is returning. Elena, he breathed, turning toward her voice. He could see her outline now, a silhouette backlit by the window. I can see light. Shapes. It's blurry, but it's there. He heard her sob, a sound of joy, and something else, something that sounded like grief. Over the next week, Alexander's vision continued to improve. The world came back in stages, first light and shadow, then colors bleeding through in watercolor washes, then gradually sharpening details. He saw his bedroom clearly for the first time in months, the library, the conservatory. He saw Marcus's relieved grin, Mrs. Chen's tearful smile, the estate grounds Elena had described so lovingly. But he didn't see Elena. She came each day still, maintaining professional distance, helping him adjust to sight the way she'd helped him adjust to blindness. But she carefully avoided being in his direct line of vision, always positioning herself just out of frame, always moving away when he turned toward her. Elena, please, he said one afternoon, his vision now nearly restored to full clarity. Let me see you. Not yet, she said quietly. Not until you're completely healed. I don't want your first clear sight of me to be incomplete. He wanted to argue, but her logic was sound. His vision was still sharpening, colors still intensifying. He could wait a little longer. Dr. Morrison's final examination came on a bright March morning. The doctor conducted extensive tests, checked and rechecked, then finally smiled. Your vision has returned completely, he announced. 20/20th acuity, full color spectrum, no deficits. Alexander, you've made a complete recovery. After the doctor left, Alexander stood in his bedroom, looking at his reflection in the mirror for the first time in months. He looked older somehow, the experience having carved subtle lines around his eyes. But those eyes were clear, focused, fully functional. He found Elena in the library, standing by the window where she'd so often described the view to him. She had her back to him, and even from behind, he could see the tension in her shoulders. Elena, he said softly. She turned slowly, and Alexander's breath caught in his throat. She was beautiful, but not in the polished, carefully constructed way Victoria had been beautiful. Elena's beauty was natural, warm, real. Dark hair pulled back in a simple ponytail, revealing a face with soft features and expressive brown eyes currently bright with unshed tears. She wore a simple blue dress, the same color she'd worn the day they met. Hi, she whispered, her voice breaking slightly. Alexander crossed the room slowly, giving her time to move away if she wanted. She didn't. He stopped in front of her, close enough to see the flecks of gold in her brown eyes, the faint freckles across her nose, the way her lower lip trembled. You're exactly as I imagined, he said quietly. No, you're more. Elena, you're... Alexander, she interrupted gently. Now that you can see again, really see, you need to think about what you want. You have your whole life back. You don't need me anymore. I've never needed you, Alexander said, and saw hurt flash across her face. Wait, I said that wrong. I mean, yes, I needed your help when I was blind. But what I feel for you has nothing to do with need. Elena, I don't need you to describe the world to me anymore. But I want you to share it with me. I want to see sunsets with you and hear you describe them anyway, because you make everything more beautiful. He stopped, took a breath, and did something he'd never done in his carefully controlled life. He took a leap into uncertainty. I love you, he said simply. I fell in love with your voice first, then your kindness, your strength, your way of finding beauty in everything. Now I can see your face and you're beautiful, but that's just confirmation of what I already knew. I love you, Elena Rodriguez. And that has nothing to do with gratitude or blindness or circumstances. It's just true. Tears spilled down Elena's cheeks. You can't love me. You're the woman I love, Alexander interrupted firmly. I don't care about backgrounds or money or what anyone thinks makes sense. You taught me that real sight isn't about eyes. It's about truly seeing what matters. And what matters is you. I love you too, Elena whispered, the words tumbling out like a confession. I've loved you for months, but I was so afraid it wasn't real, that I was just convenient, that when you could see again. Alexander cupped her face gently in his hands, seeing her clearly for the first time, seeing the love and fear and hope in her eyes. You were never convenient, he said. You were essential. You are essential. Elena, you gave me back my sight, not just my eyes, but my ability to truly see. You illuminated my darkness. Now, I want to share the light with you. If you'll have me. Yes, Elena breathed. Yes. When he kissed her, it was like seeing color for the first time, bright, vivid, overwhelming in its beauty. The darkness that had defined months of his life fell away completely, replaced by something far brighter than mere vision could provide. When they finally pulled apart, Alexander kept her close, studying her face with the wonder of a man seeing a miracle. I was so afraid, Elena admitted softly, that I'd just been your eyes in the dark. That when you could see again, you wouldn't need what I gave you anymore. You were never just my eyes, Alexander said, pressing his forehead to hers. You were my light. And Elena, even now that I can see, I still need that light. I'll always need it. Because the most important thing you taught me wasn't how to navigate in darkness, it was how to see with my heart. Outside the library windows, the sun broke through the clouds, flooding the room with golden light. But Alexander barely noticed. He was too busy looking at Elena, at the woman who had illuminated his darkest days and who would, he knew with absolute certainty, brighten all his days to come. The darkness had brought them together, but it was love, real, true, chosen love, that would keep them together in the light.